Now you're welcome back. So as discussed on the news round, Stephen Kenny's tenure starts with immediate effect. Mick McCarthy's is over. We're joined on the line by Kevin Kilbane. Good evening.
Hi Joe, how are you keeping?
Very well. How are you doing?
All's good, yeah. Everything's fine. Keeping safe, thankfully, and healthy, more importantly. So it's all good. Thanks. Yeah, yourself? How are you keeping?
All good. The same. All is healthy. All is well. So lots to be thankful for.
Good. Yeah. Exactly.
The news came through over the weekend, obviously, that the FAI had decided to make a clean decision on the situation regarding Mick McCarthy and his future and what was going to happen with the Euros postponement, and then particularly, I think, with the Slovakia game being pushed into what seems like November. In the main, I think everybody has felt it was the correct decision. Do you agree?
Yes and no. I can you imagine what it would have been like for Mick McCarthy for every press conference, every interview that he would have been doing between now and that playoff game? It would have been a constant reminder, a constant questioning of the situation. So for that, yes, but I think the position that the team's in on the verge of, on the verge of qualifying, it's probably still a long way to go just yet, but it would rankle on you, wouldn't it? It would certainly get to you if you're in Mick's position and all of a sudden you've got a playoff game to qualify for a major tournament, which was the objective. But everything's changed, of course. You know, we're in a total different place now, a total different mindset, I suppose. I think ultimately, the correct decision probably was made. Yeah.
Because about 2 weeks ago on FAI TV, Niall Quinn, he was asked about the situation, and he was saying, "Well, look, we don't know if we're going to the Euros. We'll know in June. We'll know in June 10th." And I would have thought 10th of June is a good time to start worrying about that particular instance. So that suggests there was a degree of thinking going on behind the scenes about what might happen. Yeah. But really, once the playoff game moved post 1st of August, i.e. Stephen Kenny's starting date, then really it probably became much more clear-cut, and understandably so, because I'm sure as much as Mick would like to have got to the Euros and taken the playoff game, really that playoff game has nothing to do with Mick's campaign just gone. That's a legacy of the Nations League under O'Neill and Keane, as you know. So, in effect, exactly. He's not really owed it, I guess, in the way people might have felt he was owed it if he had won the playoffs.
Well, if there was a sudden change, if you're Stephen Kenny and there's a sudden change, the mindset of Stephen Kenny would be you want to push to take the job when you've agreed to take the job. And I can imagine the phone calls that would have been made from Stephen Kenny constantly saying, look, it has to be done. Things have changed in terms of dates, but my contract is due to start then. I want to take over then. I've got a long campaign or campaigns ahead of me, and I need to get things in place now urgently, because that's the way that he would have been thinking. So you can see it from both sides, but as I said, I ultimately I think the right decision is made, Joe. Yeah,
fair enough. Impossible situation in that as well. You have the World Cup qualifiers starting in March, and you just can't have a situation where you have different managers at different stages. So it became very, very tricky.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely did. And as I said, it's been done now. I think you move on, and I'm pleased with certainly with Keith Andrews, Damien Duff going in, and his immediate staff that'll be around him. I think we certainly we're in a better position. I think we're the mindset from what's happened within the FAI over the last couple of years. I think we certainly see. I certainly see a little bit of light now. I think we see that things seem to be done the correct way. This had to be done this way, is what we're saying here. Really, ultimately, it did have to be done this way. Stephen Kenny's contract is due to start in a certain date, so it has to be done. And I think that's the difference. I think now that with what's happened in the past, I think we found ourselves in this position anyway. So it was a bizarre situation at the start, and ultimately now everything's just scratched off, and it's almost like we wipe the chalkboard off and we go again, and that's kind of how it is. And I'm pleased now that ultimately there'll be no questions asked of the manager. Mick was constantly getting asked this question anyway during his reign, and Stephen Kenny would have been constantly asked through his reign as a 21 manager. Ultimately now we can look forward with Stephen Kenny taking over his coaching staff, and the players now know what's ahead of them. And ultimately, I think we'll have one or two new additions coming in. I think we'll have a fresher squad, probably a younger squad going forward, and I think we'll all be happier for that as well.
Yes. Who's most likely to come in then? I mean, in particular, you're looking at the central midfield area, and Glenn Whelan, at his age, not playing football, you lose your conditioning even more so at that age. James McCarthy, we're hoping, is back fit. Jason Malumbi is obviously on the scene in a big way now. Like, that's one area in particular where you suspect there'll be a big freshening up.
Yeah, I think so. Malumbi looks the obvious one, and again, you'd be like me, Joe. I've only seen bits of him. I've seen bits of him when he's been on loan at Millwall. I've seen bits of him playing in the 21s. I've not seen an awful lot of him. Certainly playing at the higher level against better players. I think he's the sort of player that can actually take that on board, playing against better players, and I think he'll get better and better because of the type of player that he is. But he looks, I mean, when I've spoken to Keith Andrews over the last year or two, Keith has mentioned him specifically, talking about how he really likes him as in the midfield role that he's played in the 21s or wherever he's played, whether he's been playing at club level as well. I think he's got enough experience under his belt now. But he does look the obvious one. But it won't be just him. There'll be Adam Ida, of course. We'll be looking at Troy Parrott. We'll be looking at Aaron Conley to get more game time now as well. So there's a number of players throughout the under-21 setup who, and as I've said to you as well, you know, we're actually looking at introducing these young players for such huge games, these playoff games. Ultimately, it can make or break a career, and that's ultimately what we're looking at here. That you're introducing these young lads in such high profile, high stakes games. If they don't play well, it certainly could set them back a certain while, or ultimately, which we certainly don't want this to happen, it could be something that's in that young player's mind whenever he's going to play in the Irish jersey going forward, that it could affect their international career or the senior international career. So I think Stephen has got to be careful in how he's actually going to introduce younger players into the squad. I think it will help that there'll be 2 or 3 going in together if that were to be the case. But I think it is still, you know, a little bit of a delicate situation for Stephen Kenny to address, I feel, yeah.
Guess it helps as well. He has a feel for their personalities, which is all important. And it seems as well, we had Gary Owens and vice versa. Gary Owens on the show yesterday, and I think the feeling within the FAI is that Stephen Kenny's first game, thankfully, won't be the Slovakia game. It looks like that will be pushed to November. And so there's the Bulgaria and Finland game, and a chance for him to get to know the players a bit more, and then to get a feel for him. He gets to get some of his ideas across. Like when we spoke a couple of years ago, I remember, and you were making the point that, and maybe this was true to an extent with Brian Kerr, some of the players not too sure of, you know, Kenny's background, potentially what he's done in the game. And we are talking about a manager here who's managed in 40 plus European games. I would think very quickly, you know, they seem like a decent bunch. He'll get in there, they'll assess him as they would any manager. Footballers are a cynical bunch, and he will be given the chance, I would presume, Kev, to win them over with the quality of his ideas, which is all any manager can ask for.
Yeah, I'd like to think that would certainly be the case. Just something you touched on, the younger players, knowing him as well, knowing exactly what he's going to bring to the training ground. I think that will certainly help him as well. But the older players as well, ultimately, you want to see what he's going to bring to you. How is he going to make me a better player? How is he going to improve me? And that's what a lot of the maybe elder players will be thinking, or the more experienced players will be thinking within that squad. I'd made that point, I remember a couple of years ago, and I made that point, and maybe it was shot down by a couple, but I think... And Nathan, I remember Nathan making the point, and probably rightly so as well. Nathan's point was, well, look, we don't have a lot of players that were maybe in the position of the players or the calibre and the clubs that they were playing at during my time as well. I think that's certainly something that did go against Brian Kerr. I do feel that. But ultimately, I feel that it is the correct appointment. You spoke about his experience there at European level. I want an Irishman managing Ireland. I think he's got all the credentials to go on now and go well, and certainly we wish him all the best. But I think the players, from speaking to people that have worked under him, we've had certain guys on the show over the years that have played at Dundalk under him. Of course, young lads that have worked with him, even Keith, we've had on as well, working alongside him, speak so highly of him and how he does things, his approach to training, his approach to games. I think the players will I think it'll only make them better, and I think that's going to be the case. It might not be immediate. You know, we may have to go through 3 or 4 games, and that is ultimately something that could cost us into those playoff matches. You say we've got the Nations League games, yes, but that is something that could cost us. There could be a bit of a negative effect if things don't go right quickly. But I think long term, I think it will be right, and I think we'll start to see the benefits of a team playing a different sort of style and hopefully good attacking football in years to come.
Yeah, no, that's very much the hope. And on the care point that you made a couple of years ago, I mean, you were never saying it was right, but you were there, you experienced it. If that was the reality, that was the reality, and nobody who wasn't in the team can, tell you what you did or didn't experience. So I think you're more than entitled to make that point. Before we finish up, Kev, I do want to get your thoughts on the job Mick has done this second time round. I'll play you a clip here just to give you a sense, because it was really, really good debate. We had Gary Breen and Damien Delaney on yesterday. Oh, it's just crashed. Okay, perfect timing. It's just crashed. In short,
I didn't hear it. I've not heard it, Joe.
Well, in short, Gary Breen was very strongly of the opinion that Mick did a fine job here. One, that he, restored the mood, the relationship between fans and players, and crucially, he said Mick did improve things from a football perspective. Players knew their jobs more. He said he saw better patterns of play. Absolutely. And Damien Delaney did not agree with that at all. And, he mentioned several of the games where he didn't see those performances on the pitch. And they had a really kind of heated debate. It's worth catching on YouTube or offtheball.com if someone wants to have a listen. So it was interesting in that you had two men who really know their stuff, really tactically insightful, you'd know from them being on the show down the years, and they had really different opinions on the job that Mick had done.
Well, I think we certainly saw an immediate kick from the tide. What was his first game again, Joe?
It was such a strange campaign. Like, the first game is the Gibraltar night when executive vice president role comes into being. His second game a few days later against Georgia, the 1-0 win, the Hourihan free kick. There's tennis balls landing on the pitch. So it was a bizarre kind of situation. Then it was the 1-1 draw Denmark in June last summer, where you thought, oh, that was a good result. They beat Gibraltar. They drew it 1-1 with Switzerland. Last October, it started to lose a bit of momentum. There was the 0-0 draw away to Georgia. That was a killer. Aaron Conley came on last few minutes, but just wasn't good. And a few days later, they lost 2-0 to Switzerland away. And then the last game was the 1-0 draw with Denmark, where they had a bit of a go. Be shot to nothing, had a right go, and the tempo was up. So there was never that massive night.
No, I think that's fair to say. There wasn't the massive night. I just remember going into that Georgia game. The Gibraltar game was very strange. It was strange, everything that was happening around the FAI at the time. Yes, of course, plastic pitch, weather was horrendous as well. You don't want to make excuses, but playing international football on a plastic pitch, it's a joke, isn't it? That's the thing. Yeah. So but you cast that aside. The Georgia game, I remember we'd spoke at length going into that match, and it was. I think we're all quite nervous because Georgia had outplayed us. Both at home and away, probably 3 or 4 times prior to those games, and we'd luckily got results. I think we drew away in Georgia, and we certainly were outplayed in the home game. Seamus Coleman had scored when we won 1-0 prior to that as well against Georgia. But the Georgia performance I think it was probably the standout performance because we got a real up-tempo performance. I think we got an Irish performance. I think we got good attacking football. I think we got a lot of chances created. It was a free kick ultimately that broke them down, as you say, Conor Hourihan's free kick. But that was maybe the standout performance, I think, across the 90 minutes. It should have been more. We should have won by a lot more. But I think that result or that performance give us a little bit of optimism going forward, because the performances prior to that in the last couple of campaigns were dire. It was a dire watch, and that gave us a bit of a lift. I think it probably did go slightly downhill from there after that Georgia result, but I certainly saw a lot more thought with the play. I thought even if we were turning the opposition, I think we were in positions to turn them. You and I had spoken so often in the past. Look, if we're going to go long, we're going to go long, but we're not even in a position to go long or short. We don't seem to.
Yes.
It didn't seem, watching the team, that we knew exactly what was going to happen next. I personally saw that there were certain patterns on the pitch. If a fullback had the ball, I think you get a fullback running off the line, you maybe get a striker that's running behind. I think there were certain patterns. I could certainly see patterns, but ultimately the football wasn't great. I think, and as I was saying, I think it went downhill from that Georgia game. The playoff was always attainable. We were always going to get that playoff spot anyway. Yeah. And I think ultimately against the two best sides in the group, we didn't perform so well. Certainly the Switzerland game, home and away, the home game against Switzerland, and I said it constantly going into Switzerland, they're a decent side, they're solid, but they're not going to come and destroy you. They're not a side that's going to come and open you up at will. And I think they did that to us a lot, particularly at home. I think they outplayed us, and they should have beat us at the Aviva. So they were the ones I'm looking at really there to say, well, look, we didn't perform against the better sides, and the Georgia result was a standout performance. And let's be honest, as you know, I've been there. I've played against some of the Eastern European sides, and they are decent. They've got good technical players, but it's Georgia. That's what we have to look at and think. Georgia at home, we should be beating that side anyway. So that was maybe the standout performance, but ultimately, we didn't perform across the course of the group, no.
Yeah, and that they are 91st in the world. I guess what's very interesting now is if you take it from the Trapattoni era to where we are today, and obviously you were involved for a part of the Trapattoni era, people have, to some extent or other, if we bunch them together, Trapattoni, Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane and Mick McCarthy, a certain kind of pragmatic football is how people will pigeonhole them if you were to throw a blanket over the whole thing. And throughout that period, there has been a debate: do we have the players? Do we have the players? And the sense has been from management, one way or another. Now, Mick, in fairness, never said it explicitly, but the sense has been, well, like, I'm doing the best I can here. Like, I don't have world beaters, you know. And what we're going to see now is a manager who absolutely is going to try and get this team to play a more expansive brand of football. So, why I'm really excited is, I now will look at what the team produce, and I won't think to myself, well, maybe the manager is not insisting they play football. I know he's going to be really pushing them to do it. So we're going to see what we have here over the next year or two.
Yeah, the constant message that we don't have the players. I've hated that message when that's clearly been putting out. Yes, Trapattoni said it around us. We had good players. Don't get me wrong. We had very good players within the squad when Trapattoni took over. And even under Martin O'Neill and Roy, we didn't. Yes, I take the point that we don't have a Johnny Giles, we don't have a Roy Keane, we don't have a Robbie Keane, whoever. I take that point, but we've still got good players. We've still got players that are capable of playing as a team and producing good football as a team. Might not necessarily have a real superstar as an individual, but we've got players that's capable of doing it. And listen to Stephen Kenny over the years. Whenever I've heard him talking, I've never heard him talking about that, talking in that term like Trapattoni or Martin O'Neill constantly saying that we don't have the players. I feel as though that he's been positive about the squad of players that he's got. I think he'll be the same now, knowing full well that there will be one or two limitations to the squad, to the side that he'll be putting out. But ultimately, he'll be encouraging the players to play a certain way that he believes that can open up opposition, that can then create, that can obviously stop opposition as well. That's got to be a big part of the game as well. And I think the message will be clear to the side that, look, you can actually go out and expose opposition teams. And I think that's ultimately the message that will be clear, Joe. And that message that's come out from the side, I used to hate it, even when I was part of Trapattoni's sides. That when you're hearing that sort of message and you're hearing that sort of or you're hearing those signals that's being said about you, it was rubbish, because I knew that within that side that we've got Damien Duff, Robbie Keane, Richard Dunn. These are top class players, and real top class players. Sure. Could play in any side, and that's the difference where maybe we don't have that type of individual right now.
I was going to say, what do we have now? What's as a kind of final point to wrap up? So hopefully it's Bulgaria, Finland first, and then the Slovakia game to come in November. Well, what is realistic to expect from Stephen Kenny over the next couple of games? Albeit, I know we're talking months away, but how quickly can he affect things in a very real way? I mean, it doesn't happen overnight.
No, I think we're all fearful going into the playoff games anyway. If we do get through the first game, and obviously then we could have the Bosnia or a Northern Ireland game. I think we're all fearful of those. Can he make a dramatic difference so quickly? I don't think it's going to be that dramatic a difference to the side, but I certainly think that we'll see a different sort of style going into the games. Do you know what? I think realistically we'll be able to judge them after that, the first two games, the Finland and Bulgaria game. I think that's where we're going to be able to judge them. We're going to get a bit of a better feeling as to how the team's playing. Are we creating chances? Are we stopping sides scoring against us? Because realistically, we've got, well, as Nations League suggests, we're on a par with those sides. So yes, we should be actually going out, playing a different style that Stephen Kenny is insistent that we're going to be playing, and we're going to actually be playing in a way where we're actually going to be looking to create chances and score goals.
Because our big issue is goals. So often, and you look at the under-21s, they have goals, dripping out of them. Ireland's big issue in the last campaign has been goals.
But Joe, we've played a certain way to stop sides rather than actually go and open up sides. Yeah. There has been quality in the side. I mean, don't get me wrong. Over the years, people have questioned players like Aidan McGeady and players like Robbie Brady, Jeff Hendrick, or whoever it would be. But these are creative players. Certainly, Brady and McGeady are. They can create chances, but we've played a certain style to stop sides scoring against them that we've not been able to get the best out of any creative player that we've had in our side. It's always been about setting a side up where we're going to be solid, we're going to stop a side, and if we nick a win 1-0, I mean, look, was it 20 odd internationals or competitive internationals? I think we hadn't scored more than one goal. I don't know the stat, but it's a ridiculous stat.
It was definitely a pattern anyway.
Yeah, we can't score more than one goal in a game. If we're going to get a draw, it'll be 0-0. If we're going to win a game, it's 1-0. Now, we can't continue like that if we're seriously going to go and compete against the better nations and hopefully qualify for World Cups and Euros going forward. We've got to have a plan where if we get a goal, we're going to go and get a second goal, because we've not been able to contain sides then. You say the pattern there, Joe. How often if we've scored early in the game, even thinking of the Denmark playoff match, score early in a match, right, we're going to have to sit on this now for 85 minutes. You can't do it.
Correct. I would put it to you, that's because as a team, we don't feel we can control the game. We don't feel we can control possession. So our only option is to fall back.
There's not even a purpose to attack, though, Joe, within that.
Sure.
Like, fair enough, we might not have the players that's going to be able to control the game, but there's got to come, there'll come numerous times in a game where certain patterns arise, where you'll get a striker in behind, or you'll get a wide man on the ball, you'll get a wide man coming in off the sideline, a bit of link-up play with the strikers. As soon as we've got a goal, all the patterns go out of the team. There's no shape to the team. There's a shape to the team, but an attacking shape. Everyone is so rigid and so content just to go, well, we're going to have to see this game through now. We're just going to, look, if we draw 1-1, that's fine, we'll take the draw. Rather than actually say, well, I tell you what, we might not have a player that's going to be able to dominate in midfield and control the game, which I do feel as though we'll try to do that. But even if we haven't, there's still got to come times where we're going to have to go and get a second goal in a game, and that's not been the case. And I do feel as though that has been our massive Achilles heel, not just, say, under Mick's reign. That's been Trapattoni and Martin O'Neill's reign. Whoever it's been as manager, we've not been able to go and get that second goal to kill the game off.
Yes, well, let's hope that happens. I think everybody's quite excited about the future, and not least because we'll be out of our homes when we do eventually get round to playing these matches.
Hopefully, touch wood.
It goes without saying, I didn't give you a chance to say it, but it goes without saying Mick handled the situation with his usual grace and class over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that makes things easier as we say goodbye to each other.
Yeah,
that does make things easier.
It absolutely does. And Mick's a class act. He is a class act. And I've got a personal relationship with him, and I've known Mick, 20, 25 years or whatever it is since I was a kid, and I know that. But you get criticised for that. But you've had dealings with him as well, Joe. You know the sort of person that he is. Yeah. That he's handled this perfectly well. I do feel as though that he was thrown under a bus when he got the job. I don't feel as though that things were handled greatly when he was offered the job initially. Then think that it seemed as an outsider looking in that the whole thing changed for him, that he wasn't necessarily going to then take the team over a couple of campaigns. Everything seemed to go out the window when there was a feeling that Stephen Kenny was a more popular choice than Mick McCarthy, and we may have been going backwards to take Mick McCarthy on board. So there was a number of things around it, but Mick is a class act. I'm sure he's going to get another job. I know that you and I spoke to him. He wants to get to 1,000 games, doesn't he? He mentioned that when we interviewed him a few years ago. I think he's on about 970 career games in club management. So one achievement that would be if he could get to 1,000 games as a manager as well. And certainly I wish him all the best. And I think that any club that gets him would be, they would have a top-class manager, a top-class person, and a manager that will actually get the best out of a group of players that aren't necessarily the greatest in terms of talent. Yeah.